Scientists studying animal behavior have observed these creatures in many instances engage in some pretty sophisticated and impressive behavior that seems to be reminiscent of the type of behavior we display as human beings. For example, researchers have observed chimpanzees, both in captivity and in the wild, mourning dead. And it's clear that they seem to have an emotional response to the loss of members in their group, that they seem to, again, recognize very real loss. Many evolutionary biologists interpret this behavior as reflecting kind of an evolutionary antecedent that is a preamble to the evolutionary emergence of our sophisticated behavior as human beings. The question is that interpretation valid? I'm joined today by Dr. Kyle Keltz, who's going to help us address that question and more. Kyle has a PhD in the philosophy of religion. He's a Christian scholar. He's a professor of English and philosophy at the college level. Kyle, thanks so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Fuzz. I'm excited to talk about this because I don't know how many people are talking about this methodology with animal cognition. So.
Yeah. Well, not that many, at least in Christian apologetic circles. First of all, as Christians, how should we interpret these kind of studies?
Oh, yeah. Well, we're going to talk about some methodological distinctions. I think, just as a Christian going into it, we don't need to be all that worried about it. I know something that you emphasize a lot is that one researcher will say something like the claims you're mentioning, that it seems like animals aren't different in kind from humans, so we share something with some animal. But what we need to emphasize, for one, is, of course, Christians need to be using discernment, but for every, in animal cognition, it's almost like for every researcher who says that we're the same, there's also others who are saying, no, we don't think that this conclusion is warranted.
Yeah. So
we don't need to be all defensive going into it, and there's a few distinctions that we can keep in mind that'll help guide us along.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've talked about before, and this is something that you, I think, bring up very importantly in your PhD dissertation, is that as human beings, we have a tendency to anthropomorphize. And
yes.
And there's concern that may actually influence the way we interpret these results. So first of all, what is anthropomorphism, and maybe a little bit about what is the source of our tendency to anthropomorphize as human beings?
Okay, yeah. So anthropomorphization is whenever you attribute human abilities or human attributes to animals. In the context of animal cognition, I mean, you can anthropomorphize anything, like I'll say that my printer doesn't like me, or that's an angry storm. But anytime you're attributing human abilities or attributes to something, you're anthropomorphizing. Now, a couple things I wanted to talk about, because especially in the study of animal cognition, there's some history behind kind of almost like this bias towards anthropomorphization, but I also wanted to talk about why it's just natural for us to do it.
Yeah.
But the history behind it in the study of animal cognition is that after Darwin's theory really took hold, a part of his early theories, one of them is that he thought that there was this phylogenetic scale, right? And so the idea was that human beings are the same. All animals are the same in kind. It's just that human beings are at the top of this phylogenetic scale, and they're, in degree, they're just the best at the top, and at the bottom, they thought it would be this smooth transition all the way to the bottom, almost like a stepwise smooth thing that you would find in nature. So because a lot of researchers were buying into this, they were starting to really look for human attributes in animals. So they were in the literature, you can see them around this time, saying that, well, rats can reason, or dogs can make inferences of various sorts. Well, a researcher who came on the scene was Lloyd Morgan, and he started to emphasize, he said, look, I think you're basically being overeager with this phylogenetic scale, and he came out what we now know as Morgan's canon, which is an anti-anthropomorphic principle that when you're studying animals, you should never attribute higher order processes, human-like abilities to animals whenever you could explain it with a lower order process. It's almost like a Occam's razor of animal cognition. And anti-anthropomorphization is a principle that's actually still taught in animal cognition textbooks today, and it's emphasized in the study of it. But something that we've talked about before when we address the problem of animal suffering, and we talk about what it's like, maybe what is it like to be an animal, is that we know that one thing that we think makes humans unique is that we have this almost intrinsically personal ability, this intrinsically personal awareness when we view the world. And because that's what I tell people, I say, animals aren't self-aware, so they don't suffer as persons. And you hear some people say, well, that just sounds absurd. It doesn't seem to make any sense. Well, the problem is that whenever you think about what it is like to be an animal, you're using this autonoetic awareness, this intrinsically personal awareness, and you're casting it upon that question. So, but if you think about it, that's what we basically do to everything. The way we view the world is from this first personal perspective, this self-aware perspective. So I think as human beings, because that's what we are, we just naturally attribute human-like attributes to things. And especially with animals, because they're so similar to us, because, humans are rational animals, and then you've got non-human animals. But when they do activities similar to what we do, it's so easy for us to just think that they're reasoning through it like we do.
Well, kind of to build off of your point, the way I think about this, and I think it's essentially saying the same thing that you're saying, but maybe with different language, is that as humans we have theory of mind, right?
Yes.
That I recognize that you have a mind just like mine, and I can begin to anticipate in what you're thinking, what you're feeling, right? And then we have this desire to kind of link our minds together, right? And that's part of what makes us unique. Animals don't seem to have that capability, but the net effect is that we then start attributing a human-like qualities to everything else around us.
Yes.
Inanimate things and in animals, and that's the danger, right?
Right.
So even if you're operating with this anthropomorphic mindset, it's very difficult to break away from that because of our tendency as human beings to do that very thing.
Right.